I'm going to show you how I do feathers, and I thought the first best way to show you is with pencil and paper. Actually, I'm using a big fat Sharpie so it shows up good. I always start with the spine, and I start at the bottom, and when you do a feather on the machine, unlike drawing it, you want to be able to do it without ever having to stop. So when you draw it, you want to try and do it the same way. So I'm going to try to do this without ever taking the pencil off the paper, because then it's something that I can do with the needle and thread. So I start at the bottom and I go up to the top, and I make the top feather. Pretend I didn't take my hand off. I wanted you to see that, so I had to move my hand out of the way. And so I come down and then I make the middle. You don't always have to do that. And then I continue all the way down. So now I've got a double line of stitching there. And then I do the feathers in a continuous motion. And I can see as I'm looking at that, my hand is totally covering that. I'm going to try and do this right-handed. This is not the way I work because I'm left-handed, but I'm going to try and do it with my right hand so you can see what I'm doing. So it goes up and around and up and down and up and down. Now this would be much neater if I was doing it with my left hand, but I wanted you to be able to see it, and the camera is on that side. So then I get up to the top, I go back down, start at the bottom again, and work my way up. Now, if you don't want, you don't need to put this center in each of these lobes of the feather. I like that. I guess that's just my style. So that's what I'm doing when I'm doing this on the fabric. Now, on the one that I'm working on, they're going to be real curvy. So, well, that soaks through, doesn't it? So I make my first part rather curvy, and it goes like that. And then you do the other side. And you see, I don't ever have to pick up the pencil, so I don't have to stop. So this is all one continuous line of quilting. You do have to stop if you run out of bobbin thread, but that's how I do it. That's how I do a feather. So I'll get this out of the way, and I'll show you with the real thing. I'm going to zoom in a little closer here so that you can see it. So it's showing up kind of blue on the camera, but this is purple thread. It's 40 weight cotton, and I have my favorite free motion foot in here. This is an old Singer darning foot. Any free motion foot will work. You just need to get the kind that's the right height for your machine. most standard machines have a foot available for them that will fit. Most old Singers, for example, will take a standard low shank free motion foot. Some require a slant shank or a high shank, but you can find one for your foot if your machine didn't come with one. I'm using a Singer 66 treadle machine, but any machine works the same way. I'm also using, this is quilting cotton for the backing. This is polyester batting, which I like for this kind of quilting. This is going to be the side of a tote bag. This is Warm and Bright, I think is what it's called. It's a polyester. And the top is suede, not fake suede, but real genuine leather suede. So I'm using a leather needle. It's a size 16. And the point of a leather needle is cut differently so that it's more flat, and it pierces a little slit into the leather rather than a round point. I've done it with a regular needle. The leather needle works much better. Other than that, you may have to adjust your tension. In fact, every time you do free motion quilting, it's probably going to require a little adjusting on your tension to get it just right, because you'll have different materials and the thread will play differently. I'm using the same thread on the back as I am on the front, and in most cases with this old machine, it's easier to get balanced tension top and bottom when I have the same thread in the top and the bottom. So that's what I'm using, and you can see I've done a little bit of this swirling feather quilting, and then I'm just doing a little fill work in between just to make that stand out even more. So my next step would be, and if I can show you maybe a little bit, I don't mark this, but if I were to want to do some basic marking on here, just for example, I could draw the spine in. I could use on this, I could use a piece of chalk, and here's a little bit of chalk that I've got sitting here, and I could use that to draw the basic spine in there, and then if I don't like it, that'll come right off. In fact, it comes off so easy that if you try and do real detailed marking with a piece of chalk, it's usually pretty well gone by the time you get halfway through, because your hands will wipe it off. But something like that. But again, I usually don't mark it. I usually just kind of go at it free-handed. The important thing is your speed, and this is a lot of curves. And what happens if you go too fast around a curve is you'll get on the back, you'll get weird looking stitches. And I might just do a little bit of that just to show you what it looks like, but I'm going to start out doing it right. This piece was spray basted together. The leather, it's a lot harder to pin baste or thread based, so I do these with spray basting, and it doesn't take much, but if you leave it sit for a while after it's been basted and don't work on it, the basting does tend to come loose. On regular fabric, if you've spray basted and it's coming apart, you can give it a little press with an iron, and it will make the glue become sort of reactivated. I don't recommend pressing a piece of leather water and leather are not real good friends. So get your basting done relatively close to the time that you're going to do the quilting, so you won't lose your stickiness. So if you can see this in the camera, and I hope you can, I'm basically doing exactly what I did with my pencil. I'm coming around up the middle, back down, back up, and around. Now, it takes practice to be able to get to the point where see, I missed it there. To get your stitching so that it's back over the same line, so it doesn't look like you have a bunch of double stitching. But if you do, it really isn't a big deal. And if you look in my spine here, I've got some spots where I didn't catch it exactly. And of course, the rule for me is the minute I turn on the camera is the minute I know that my stitching is not going to be as good as it normally is, because I'm trying to keep my hands out of the way. Normally I'd have my hands a little closer, but I'm trying to keep them out of the way so that you can see what I'm doing as I go around. Your stitch length, when you're using a non-stitch length regulated machine like this old Singer, the stitch length is regulated by how fast the machine is going in relation to how fast you're moving your hands. Now, this leather tends to stretch more than fabric does. And so sometimes I have to stop a little bit and push that little bump that grows on there. I have to kind of push it down to get it to behave. Because it is, even though this is spray basted together, there's a good deal of give in the top layer. What you may or may not know about leather is it isn't flat. They flatten it out quite a bit in the tanning process, but you know, this used to live around an animal, so it's never perfectly flat. It will flatten out when you quilt it, but it's going to have some natural give to it and some natural puckering. And you have to, if you're working with leather, that's what you have to work around. But having said that, you could easily do this with any fabric. It doesn't have to be leather. Regular quilt fabric works great on denim, upholstery fabric. This I'm thinking of if you're making a quilted tote bag like I am. Denim and upholstery fabric are good choices because they're heavy and will be good and sturdy and long lasting. So you may be used to thinking of only quilting fabric, but as long as you've got the right needle in your machine, you can just about quilt anything successfully. And you can see that I am going at a kind of a moderate speed here. I'm not trying to get this done in a zippy speed. I've heard a lot of people say that they have better luck if they floor it and go as fast as they can. I find that to be the complete opposite of my experience. If I go slow and steady, I get results that I'm much happier with. So now I'm back to the start of that big feather, and let me zoom out again so you can maybe see that. So this is the part I just did, and I think I'm going to keep it out for a minute here while I come back the other side so you can maybe see that from a different perspective. So again, this is a treadle machine that I'm using, so the speed is regulated by how fast I pump my feet to make that machine run. Most of you probably have a foot pedal on your machine, and it will maybe take some practice to get used to just how much pressure you want to put on that to get a speed that works for you. I have done this with a electric machine with a foot pedal, and it's the same, but it did take me a while to make the transition to learn how to use the foot pedal rather than the treadle pedal, and still get it at a decent speed. I have one machine, it's a really nice one, that has a speed dial on it, sort of. There's a lever that I can turn that makes it go from its slowest setting all the way up to the jackrabbit setting. When I free motion quilt on that machine, I keep it at its lowest setting. But I think you can see how I'm going around and doing this just like I did in the diagram. And then the last thing I'll do is do the filling in between of the non-feathered spaces. And I'm starting to get a little bit of a bunch there, so I had to kind of use my fingers to push that out. But that's what happens with leather, it stretches. If my foot had less pressure on it, it wouldn't push the fabric out of position as much, but what I find is that that also means that I'm skipping stitches. You need to have enough pressure on that foot to push down pretty hard on that fabric, or you do end up with skipped stitches. So now I'm done, and I'm going to go with little tiny circles into the in-between parts of the feather, and this will make the feather itself stand out more, I think. And it, even though the thread is not high contrast with the fabric, it does create a little bit of contrast and makes it show up a little better. Now if you look, there's also a section between here, this feather and this feather, that I need to get to fill in, and I'm just going to cheat my way through like this. When you're free motion quilting, the one thing that's the easiest, I find, is that the less starts and stops you have, the better. So anything you can do to not have to cut your thread and start over is just the way to go. So that's why I kind of drove that line of stitching through here between the leaves on the feather, so I can fill this part in without having to stop. Any place you stop is a potential place for the thread to start coming undone, and the best way to you know, if you're doing a quilt for a show, the way that you want to finish those ends where you start and stop is that you really want to thread them onto a needle and pull them in between the layers so that the tail ends are hidden. When I'm doing something that's a little bit less needing to be perfect, what I often do is just do a few little back stitches back and forth and just cut the threads off flush, and they stay in fine. It does make a little bit of a thicker area where you can see more thread, but it's the way we normally do it when we're sewing, so I think it's fine. So now that area is filled in through here. And the next thing I'm going to do is another curling feather, probably something like that. And you just, in this design, it's just a matter of twirling them around and filling it in. If I had specific spaces that I wanted to fill in, I would create the shape of the feather to fill the specific space. But in this case, the only space I really have to worry about is the actual shape of the piece of fabric. And I'm much more of a quilter than I am a piecer. So I usually make these in the style of a whole cloth, which is just one piece of fabric with a lot of quilting on it. But you certainly could do the same thing with a pieced top and quilt according to the design on the top. So again, I go around that top, and then I double up and go back down, and I'll go all the way back around and then start back up again. What I have here is something went wrong. Do you see that? So I am going to have to, I think I might have a snag in my bobbin, so I'm going to have to stop and take a look at that. So that's what it was, a twist in the bobbin, and so I'm going to start again. I bring the needle down, I'll bring that lower thread up, and I'm going to tuck it under the foot so it doesn't get in my way. And go ahead and work back around. Now, here's where I could take these threads and tie them and tuck them inside, but when I started I did a couple of really tight together stitches there, so I think it's okay to cut them off, and they will get sewn over again as the feathers come on, so I'm gonna do it the easy way. I'm working on another quilt that's full-sized. Actually, it's not quite full-sized, it's only 60 inches wide. But with heavy fabric. It's not leather, but it's like this, and I've used 2 layers of batting, and that thing weighs a ton, but I'm doing it on the same machine, and you just have to wad everything up and stuff it under here to get it to work. And what I'm doing on this one, where I'm kind of rotating it more frequently, you can't do that. So bigger pieces are in a lot of ways a little harder because you can't manipulate the piece around in the machine as much. So these smaller pieces I think are a good thing to learn on. The first quilt I machine quilted was a full-sized quilt, and it was really frustrating, and I'm actually surprised I went to, as far as to do another one because it really was frustrating. But once you practice and you get the hang of it, it does start to get easier. So even on a small piece, if you feel super frustrated and things are not going as smoothly as you want, don't despair. The main way to improve your skills is to do a lot of it and practice. Once you get a lot of practice in, you'll get to the place where it feels right. You can visualize the speed is correct. Your stitch length starts turning out good. It becomes second nature, really, what you should do with your hands and how to maneuver everything. So it takes practice, but it becomes second nature, like riding a bike. When you first get on a bike to ride it, you really have to think about all the things you need to do, how you're supposed to balance yourself, how you're supposed to turn the pedals, how you're supposed to steer. After you've been riding a bike for a while, those things all come without even thinking about it. You just get on and do it. So I think that free motion machine quilting is the same. You initially have to think about all kinds of things. You have to think about how fast the machine is going. You have to think about the design. You have to think about how fast the needle is moving up and down, what the thread is doing, how big the stitch length is. And after a while, all that thinking is happening subconsciously, and you don't really have to get so stressed out over it. It just starts to happen. But that takes practice. And once you get all the practice in, that's when it starts to become enjoyable. And don't expect it to happen right away. It might take you a couple of quilts at least to get through the frustrating parts before you get to the part where it becomes relaxing and enjoyable. At least that was the case for me. When I started, I thought, boy, this is so hard. I don't know that I could really do this very frequently because it's just so stressful. But now that I've done a lot of it, it's become quite relaxing. And even the sound of the machine when it's humming along doing its thing is quite soothing to me. So don't give up if you have a bad start. Just keep practicing. And if you're going to do feathers, there's a bunch of different ways to do them. The way I showed you on pencil and paper is the way I do them, but lots and lots of quilters do them differently. There's many quilters who have 3 or 4 different ways that they do a feather. So find the way that works for you and the way you like the way the results look. So back around to the beginning, and I will do the other side the same way, and then I'll go back and do some more of the little tiny circles to fill in. But I think you can get the idea from there how I do freeform feathers. And I hope you get a chance to practice, and happy quilting!